So media control symbols are kind of interesting because they're an example of something called dominant design. Despite the fact that most of these symbols, which everyone is probably familiar with, originating in the 1960s, they weren't actually standardized by any organization until 2003 by the International Standards Organization. That means that for the better part of 40-ish years, all of these symbols were being used across multiple different companies and manufacturers, multiple different countries and cultures and languages, all because people just kind of agreed on it organically. There weren't these big wars of this should be the stop symbol and this should be the pause symbol. It just kind of happened. So what is it about these symbols that is so intuitive, and where do they actually come from? The play button is pretty obvious to begin with. Arrows have been used since the dawn of time in human cultures to symbolize motion in a direction. The play arrow points to the right because in most Western languages we read from left to right. So that is the direction of forward. That's the way we read music as well. It follows logically then that if you were to put two arrows next to each other facing the same direction, it would imply going really forward, like fast, zooming. Thus we have the fast forward symbol, and reverse it, you go the opposite direction. But we don't call that fast backwards, we call it rewind, which funny enough is like a word that we've just carried over from tapes and just never really bothered to update or change because everybody knows what rewind is, kind of in the same way how many modern phone services or call functions still use like a telephone landline symbol as a form of skeuomorphism. It's some like purely linguistic skeuomorphism in the word. I'm sure there's a term for that some linguist in the comments can whine at me about. Sometimes you'll see a bar at the end of either the fast forward or rewind button, and that tends to symbolize just the beginning or the end of the timeline that either a song or a piece of video begins and ends at. Almost universally, you will also see a single arrow plus that bar at the beginning or pointing the other way to represent jumping to the end or the beginning of something for the same reason. Kind of weird that we use two arrows to symbolize going forward, but a single arrow to represent jumping forward, but I don't know, that's just kind of what we've settled on over the years. The recording symbol is kind of interesting because it actually originates more so from recording hardware itself. You see, back in the day when we were using primarily physical tape, or when that was really the only option available to people, recording was kind of an important process to know was going on because you could run out of tape, or you could accidentally record over physical tape if you weren't being careful. So it was kind of important for people to know that they were doing it, and therefore manufacturers for multiple different types of recording equipment settled on they turned towards pretty standard design language of the color red and a light. If you look around you, all sorts of things in your environment, if you go out into the city or the town or wherever, you will see tons of things marked in red, and those are things that are supposed to draw your attention as, hey, this is a little bit important to pay attention to. Stop signs, fire hydrants, places you can't park, stuff like that. So to symbolize that recording was in progress, oftentimes recording devices would have some kind of red light. It was circular because it's really easy to produce like circular bulbs and lights and stuff. And oftentimes it would even blink just to be an extra indicator that a process was ongoing. So the record function, I'm literally looking at OBS right now. There is a red circle to indicate that I am recording at the moment. That red circle just became the standard for recording. The pause symbol is probably the most hotly debated one of these, and its origins seem like no one really agrees on them. There's a couple different answers, and some of them might even actually be connected to each other. The first one you'll probably find when looking up this answer is that the pause symbol is meant to represent the appearance of many tape heads on tape recorders. The tape head is essentially like a little electromagnetic component that either writes information onto blank tape as it's being recorded or reads it back when it's being played back. And if the tape is going to be stopped or paused or fast forwarded or rewinded for any reason, it would have the head would have to be physically lifted off of the tape. The reason that many tape heads had this double bar symbol actually potentially comes from music and poetry in a symbol known as the kaisura or caesura. I'm not entirely sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. Apparently, it is caesura. Caesura. A caesura in music or poetry just indicates a pause. Now, the caesura is two slanted lines, but it's possible that in industrial production or just ease of like recognizability on stuff, that it was turned into two straight parallel lines. The pause symbol might have nothing to do with tape heads at all, but it could also be the caesura, again, just made into two straight upstanding lines. It's not super clear, and there is actually one final origin which I have found in a kind of obscure thread from over 10 years ago at this point. In a thread on the Straight Dope forums, under their factual questions section, someone asks for the origin of all of these symbols, and much discussion is had. That thread begins in 2008, and in 2015, someone known as Harry Design comes in. They are a guest account, and all this preamble is because I couldn't really verify anything about this person, but it is a fairly detailed story, so it's at least worth considering, I suppose. They claim to have been a designer for the Ampex Corporation in the 1960s and the inventor of the modern pause button. According to them, they were having troubles creating a universal symbol to communicate the idea of pausing something, and so they took a look at the square symbol to mean stop and decided to split it in two to represent a stutter stop or a sorta stop in their words. Again, they are a guest on the forum, and there's no real way to verify any of the things that they say besides some of the details that they include. They cite specifically that they worked at Ampex in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, in the Consumer Products Division on Landmere Road and Estes Avenue. I bring that up because I looked it up because I was like, hey, wait a second. And I lived minutes away from there for like 10 years in my childhood. That's kind of weird. So the pause symbol is easily the most mysterious of these symbols. I have my own theory as to what it represents. Remember how timeline imagery was brought up in terms of the jump to the forward or the end kind of thing? Here's my idea. All right, so here's the timeline of like the music, the song that you're listening to, or the video, or what have you. All right, now we're gonna include a pause. There it is. That's my theory. I think it's like it represents a little split for a second, and then you like peel it back off to play. I don't know. That's the best I could come up with. Speaking of the stop, the final real symbol that we're going to talk about, there's 100 others. But the stop one is really the main major one that's existed for a really long time, and that one is, funny enough, the one symbol that people are the least interested in talking about or finding the origin to. The best thing that I could find is that when you're representing forwards and backwards using arrows, a square represents like a neutral arrow, almost like the center of a joystick, something like that. There is surprisingly little information about the etymology or the history of these symbols. I'm not sure what the exact right word would be, which I find a little surprising, seeing as they are so prevalent in our lives, basically to the point that no one even really thinks about it. That could be why. I just happen to wonder what the heck the pause button is supposed to represent while I was trying to fall asleep a few nights ago, and it led me down this really weird, inconclusive rabbit hole in a lot of cases. It's also this interesting kind of smorgasbord of intuitive symbols that you'll find represented in plenty of other places throughout human culture, as just things that are part of universally recognized symbols like the arrows. And then there's stuff that is very of the moment and hardware based, like the record symbol, and could even have origins in obsolete technology like the tape head. I'm sorry, tape fans. Sorry, I called you obsolete. I also find it impressive that throughout all this time, not only, as I mentioned before, have none of these symbols been standardized, or they weren't until 2003, which is a really long time, but they've also never been copyrighted or anything like that. They're just sort of these universally agreed upon free symbols that everyone uses to represent media control. And I'm not really sure what that says, but it's kind of neat. This is my side channel where I make like little videos like this. If you want to see my main channel where I actually put effort and like time and stuff into my videos, you can click the link that's going to be at this like end card or something, or it's in the description. And speaking of the stop symbol, this video is also stopping.